I really appreciate the opportunity. I watched a couple of your episodes. It's pretty exciting. So you're doing great things, that's for sure.
Appreciate that. And also appreciate you coming on and just, sharing your knowledge and experience and perspective. And that's what this podcast is all about. I started this thing up and, it was right at the beginning kind of quarantine last, was it last year? Seems like it was 10 years ago, but
Right.
last May. And it was just kind of a way to talk to, at that point, it was kind of just myself, but like, just talk, I was stuck inside for literally like
That's
6 weeks. And
yeah, that's the thing is like people don't realize how hard quarantine actually was for a lot of people, like mentally, just not being around people or depending on your location and stuff, So it's just been, I think mental health awareness is really on a rise, right? I mean, a lot of people are dealing with some things, and these podcasts really helped a lot of people out because it's something that you could, just like you said, you could just talk through Zoom, and even though you weren't personally connected with somebody, you definitely had that connection, So it definitely helped a lot of people out. But then it also got a message across, right? So wherever you wanted to do from a health and wellness perspective, you can start spreading that word, And I think you saw, is better than anybody else. There's a lot of podcasts that have popped up, right? They all have useful information, and it's pretty awesome. So
before we dive too deep into anything else, let's have you introduce yourself.
My name is John Patrick. I'm currently a staff member at George Walton Academy. That's it's academy in Monroe, Georgia. Staff member of the Department of Human Performance. It's a brand new department there. I came there from the collegiate sector. I worked 22 years in the collegiate sector at different universities. Division I universities with different sports, anywhere from being a director to being an assistant to be a GA and intern. Originally from Northeast Ohio, from Youngstown, Ohio, and then obviously my career has taken me to different locations: Texas, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, pretty much North Carolina. So all over the state, just because this profession is a quite interesting one, right? But as far as coaching goes or whatnot, I think I'm really passionate about coaching. I've had plenty to get out of the business, but it's always something I really want to help those individuals and try to really try to develop individuals from an athletic perspective, but also a personal and character perspective. So that's a little bit about myself. You see, what you see is what you get. I'm pretty truthful as far as what I say sometimes, and people don't like that. But I think that's what we need in today's society. I'm really truthful with my athletes, and a lot of them have right now working in the academy setting, a high school setting. A lot of them have D1 dreams and D1 hopes, and a lot of them have been fed certain information from certain trainers or coaches. And the thing is I've worked at that level, and I try to get them prepared as possible. So it's a little eye-opening for them, but I think it's something that they need just to prepare them for life in general. So that's huge. So,
and as far as you kind of mentioned like all the different places you've been around to, do you think that the world of strength conditioning will ever get to a place that is like, this is, where I'll be for 30, 40 years? And partially, I think maybe it won't, just because I don't know if that's the way the world is anymore. I think it used to be that way more, right. With people kind of getting into that company role, and that's where they worked until they retired. But it kind of just makes me wonder, will strength conditioning go that way as it becomes more professionalized, more I think valued? Certainly it's valued now, but just continues to gain value. Do you think it will, or do you think it'll just kind of still be people, jumping around to different locations and things?
Yeah, there are a few coaches in the collegiate realm that have been consistently at their school for 20, 30 years. It's very few and far between. The biggest thing is wins and losses pretty much drive and kill careers, right? So it's something that you really don't have really any control over, being in strength conditioning. Like, you're trying to prepare individuals as much as possible. But I think that, the more that money controls the collegiate sector as far as wins and losses and, being successful and driving that thing, there's going to be more and more change all the time. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. I think a lot of people are going to, get out of the profession. There's a lot of positions opening up from a military perspective, from a contract perspective. So a lot of people have, left. I think over the next 3 years, there's supposed to be close to 500 new positions opening up, in the government as far as contract positions. So I know the people I've talked to, a lot of them have, are trying to get in that realm because it's a little bit more stable, right? Even high school, that's one reason I've went to the high school level is it's a lot more stability, right? And you can be there for an extended period of time. I'm not hired through athletics. I'm hired through academics. So I have a spot in the academic role as far as our Department of Human Performance. So I'm considered a teacher, even though I work with primarily, student athletes and some students. But, I think those are two hotbeds as far as stability goes. The collegiate realm is a little touch and go. At those smaller institutions, you can be there for a period of time, but you're really going to be limited on resources, and you're going to be limited on salary and how much you can move up the ladder. And then some of those big schools are, I hate to say it, but it's all about wins and losses and not ruffling any feathers. And you go in there and you do your job. And then, coaches are always looking for the next best place, right? Like, where are we going to next? So, I see a lot of coaches going that route as far as high school and tactical, but then even trying to have a backup plan, as far as having their own business, having their own podcast. You've seen it yourself, right? Having their own websites, something that, if they do get out of the profession, they can still have a hand in it somehow through some type of internet-based training or some type of cloud application training. I think with, those team builder applications and those Train Heroic applications, you can do a lot more stuff online nowadays than ever before too, right? So I think a lot of people are going that route too. So I think, we talked a little bit about, the whole quarantine aspect and stuff. I think that has really struck home with a lot of people, because for a period of time they were able to see their families and work, be at home for a period of time. And then all of a sudden they go back to the collegiate hours and they're like, what am I doing? You know what I'm saying? So I think the sense of family and being around people has really come, forward. So a lot of people are looking for other avenues to go rather than just staying in that collegiate realm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think, from a sports perspective, what kind of power does say maybe a head football, head basketball, just whatever it is that's big at that school, what kind of pull do they have when it comes to the strength conditioning coach, or do they even care most of the times, as long as it's
no? I mean, those larger institutions, they automatically have their go-to guy, right? So as soon as the head coach gets a certain position, or maybe one of their staff members leave, they already have a list of people already in mind. Whether it's, a lot of larger, big time strength coaches have agents, just like coaches do. So it may be something that they share the same agent. So maybe they have a list of individuals. It may be something that maybe from the staff, one of their staff members recommends or highly recommends somebody. So those kind of things. I mean, those coaches going into, you always have to be prepared, because, if your first guy turns you down, you have to go with your second guy and third guy, right? So they have a list of individuals. So that's a big thing, is really networking is huge. It really doesn't, I mean, I hate to say this, but, everybody says, well, you have to get your master's, or you have to have this degree or that degree. I mean, that stuff is important, but your networking is huge. There hasn't been a position that I've ever gotten that I haven't, like, someone I've known hasn't recommended me for it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I've worked at some large, not necessarily large institutions, but some Division I institutions, and someone that, always got my foot in the door, and then I took it from there, as far as interviewing and whatnot. But that's the biggest thing is yeah, they have the power. They have somebody that fits their mold, that they can trust. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's not necessarily the program that they do, but that they're a trustworthy individual, and they can, pretty much, stick with that person for a period of time. So they're once you're into that, whole niche, as far as on a coaching staff with a head coach and that staff, it's like a small family. It really is. And then wherever they go, you're pretty much traveling around with them, as far as different spots and stuff like that. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. And it seems like we're talking about, there's just so much mobility to it. And, man, it's kind of crazy that it is. But going to the beginning stages of your career, when you first decided to get into this field, what kind of preconceived notions did you have about it? And then like, in what ways did it turn out to be maybe a little bit different?
I think the biggest thing coming into strength conditioning, because I first was a GA, so I worked for a GA for a period of time. I was a GA at University of Texas El Paso, and then a GA at Georgia Southern, and that's where I finished my graduate work. But I had a unique opportunity as I went from being a GA, which is a graduate assistant, and I went right into being a head strength coach. So I wasn't really groomed as being assistant. I didn't have like a lot of time as being assistant, right? So my big thing is, when I was a GA, I thought the program that you put on paper and that you implemented was everything. I thought that would, if this program was perfect, then it was going to get individuals, to be, national champions or win games and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, the more I was in the business and the more that I, was around great coaches, I found out those relationships with those kids are really what made the difference, if that made sense. Just having those kids buy in, not being, initially, when you get into the program, you think, a militant attitude is the best attitude, and you can be in there, coaching kids up, and that's not coaching. That's just being a boss. It's not being a leader. So the big thing is really finding out those relationships and really finding out about those kids, what really makes them tick, and showing them that you care. And then all of a sudden now you have a following, right? Like now kids believe in you, they understand what you're doing. And then there's no pushback. There's early in career, there may be pushback because the kids don't want to do a certain exercise, or maybe it doesn't fit that, maybe you're trying to push exercise that doesn't fit that kid's body type or that build as far as what they need, but you don't know any better. You think, well, hey, I'm going to do cleans. Everybody has to do cleans, right? So you're just kind of like in that zone. So you're kind of fixed to an exercise. And then eventually you're like, well, it's not necessarily the exercise that's going to make or break this kid. It's really, there's a lot of different movements that can work with that exercise. So instead of, if you're working with triple extension and saying that clean is the only exercise, well, now we can do, sprints, you can do sled jump, sled pushes, you can do jumps, you can med ball tosses, you can do all those kind of things to elicit some type of power or triple extension movement. So now you have this wide range, and that really comes from experience, and that comes from pretty much diving deeper into education and trying to be self-education and giving yourself that knowledge. So I think that's the biggest thing is really not, really trying to build relationships. And I still talk to a ton of kids that I even, when I first started coaching, I still talk to those kids from, 20 years ago. They'll reach out, or we talked about social media earlier. Like if I didn't have social media, I wouldn't be able to contact with those kids. Right. So it's been 20 years since I was at Jackson University, and I still talk to some of those kids religiously. Right. So that's the thing, is those relationships, and they'll come back with stories. Hey, you remember this? And hey, remember that? And I'm just like, why did we even do that? So, but it's something that you can remember. And the thing is, they understand, what you're trying to do. And now things have just evolved so much because there's so many more resources out there for you to learn from an educational standpoint. But getting back to your question, I think really those relationships are really important, and really trying to grow those as much as possible. So.
And what kind of do you think you learned, about yourself through the athletes, being able to be around them and coach them and teach them?
Yeah, I mean, from a personality standpoint, I think strength coaches get this persona of being, bald head, goatees, cut off shirts. You only see the things that people put on TV, right? Like, you see the get back coaches on the college sideline, or the guys jumping up in the air, get guys hype and stuff like that. The thing what I found out more about myself is that I was a very compassionate individual, right? Like I had compassion for the athletes. I wanted them to succeed. A lot of the athletes would come to you with issues or problems before they would even tell their parents, or before they would even tell the head coach. So all of a sudden you're this medium, right? And you're like, okay, well, you're kind of like this liaison that you're trying to, help them cater through their collegiate career. Because you might have a kid for, 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden you're that father figure, or you're that parent, while they're there. So you build that relationship and build that bond. And I found out that, I started caring a lot more about not to say wins and losses are great. I mean, that's fantastic. But in the beginning, that's what it was all about, conference championships, making it so far in the playoffs or in conference play. And then all of a sudden it became more about, hey, I want this kid to be successful, not only in the athletic field, but outside the athletic field. Like I want them to graduate. I want them to be successful. I want them to move on and have a great family and have, have everything that they need to have as far as a young adult goes. So now all of a sudden, now you start pouring yourself more into not necessarily X's O's as far as training, but as far as leadership, as far as, finding ways to motivate individuals, trying to give those individuals a little bit. The more I could educate myself on those things, the more I could pass on to those athletes. So I think that was a huge perspective about myself is, training wise, I still educate myself on training and I kind of have my system down a little bit. I'm very open as far as my training philosophy, but I started coming out of my shell a little bit, and it really opened me up as far as being compassionate and wanting these individuals to be more than just athletes, right? Like I think you'll hear this all the time is, and you'll see this a lot with Power 5 football or any football program really is, and any athletic program is, they'll use these kids for 4 or 5 years, right? And they'll get the most out of them as far as playing and stuff like that. And then after their playing career, these kids have these degrees, but they don't know what to do next, right? Like they don't know, they're given so much in the collegiate system as far as, clothing, as far as they're given, some kids get, money every month as far as a stipend, they're given so much food as far as training table, like they don't know the basic necessities that take care of themselves, right? And and everything is planned out from a time management perspective. So when a kid comes out and they graduate, all of a sudden now they're thrown into the fire of what the real world is. And now all of a sudden they don't have that structure as far as being a collegiate athlete, right? So now they're sleeping in to a certain period of time because they're staying out late. They don't know how to manage their money. There's a lot of little things that are going into play. They're eating out all the time because they don't know how to cook food. I mean, these are things that, a lot of former athletes would reach out and be like, hey coach, like, I don't know, like what's my next step? And I think that's something that collegiate programs need to figure out. I know there's some collegiate programs that do a really good job of getting those kids ready for the next level, but I think it's something that as a maturity issue and stuff, since those kids do so much for our programs for 4 or 5 years, it's something we need to give back to those kids. And yeah, they're getting education or maybe they're getting scholarship money, but it's something that, if they're not going professional, which a very small amount do, it's something we need to make them, pretty reliable citizens of where they're at. Right. And I think that's a huge perspective too. Even with paying athletes, it's gone on for a number of years. Hey, student athletes should get paid or they should make this money, and this kind of thing. And I have no problem with that. I mean, even though they're getting scholarships, that's fantastic. But, if it's something that you're going to pay student athletes, maybe it's something that, they're going to get a certain money and they don't get that money right away, but maybe they get it and maybe that money's put into an IRA or something as far as a future investment. So that way they don't get that money right when they get out of school and just blow it on absolutely nothing. Maybe a certain percentage of their stipend is taken every month and put into an IRA. So then eventually 5-10 years down the road, they're getting a chunk of money that's going to be helpful for them. You know what I'm saying? So now everybody's going to be different about that, but I think that's something really giving back to the student athlete and really trying to make them a really, law abiding as far as being a person of the environment. Right. So I think that's huge. So.
Yeah. And it's something I've never thought of or heard anybody kind of bring up is that, and I've thought about it from the aspect of like, how can we, especially from a high school perspective, because that's where you get, most of your athletes in the strength and conditioning realm, how can we teach them, proper nutrition while we're here, because it's important for the sport, but it's also important for life. And, how can we teach them, and I think it's a little bit better in college, probably just because it is a little bit more, standardized, but like, how can we teach them good exercising habits? Like those things right there are so important, so basic, yet so many people fail to do those things after sports. It's so easy.
100%.
You just look around and it's so obvious to see, but like, and it's interesting too, because, and I don't have any statistics, so I don't know one way or the other, but when, and it just seems like sporting participation isn't necessarily going down, but I think less kids are involved on a general scale. I think less kids are playing a lot of sports. More kids are maybe going to, the e-sport route or going in different directions compared to 30, 40 years ago, where everybody seemed like they were at least doing some type of physical activity, whether that be an outdoor event after school, or whether that be a structured sporting event at school. So I think just teaching kids, high school, college, and so on, will be so beneficial to impacting not just them, but then they impact their friends, they impact their wives or their husbands and their kids, and
100%.
kind of just seeing kind of how that trickle down could potentially work to affect the health of our society on a greater scale.
No, you're 100% correct. And just to touch base off of what you said, I think as far as individuals playing sports, I think individuals playing multiple sports has really gone down quite a bit. I think everything's become very specialized, right? Like there's specialized training. People are specializing early that probably shouldn't be specializing early. They probably shouldn't be playing the sport that they're even actually specializing in. But at the end of the day, money's gonna drive that, and parents are gonna drive that, right? And you touch base on really getting high school athletes ready for the next step, right? As far as nutrition, livelihood, and that's one reason the Department of Human Performance here at George Walton was created. I mean, that's pretty much dead on. So, our administration, our staff, pretty much saw a need, and they said, "Hey, we want you guys to come in and build. Not only do we train athletes, like we train athletes. We have a 7-period day, and we train athletes daily. We do train some athletes before school. We don't really train any athletes after school just because they're at practice. But the initiation is this is our first semester. We're just doing like athletic development class, but then from there, our next semester is our job is to break up and actually devise classes that individuals can specialize in. So if it is nutrition, I'm kind of really stuck in the nutrition realm just because my wife is a dietitian. So she's very big in those perspectives. So it's something that, if I'm going to teach nutrition or have something like that, I'm always going to bring her on board because I think it's important to have a dietitian go over those things, a specialist in those areas, right? Because there's so many things nowadays with different, whether it's, gluten aspects or whether it's somebody that has an eating perspective or even eating disorder, really trying to nip those things in the bud as soon as possible is very, very intelligent. But even going from a perspective of different training methods, from a high school level, we have some individuals that want to train like athletes, and we have some individuals that are just doing it from a wellness perspective. So that's the thing that we're going through now, since this is our first semester, is everybody is thrown into the fire as far as one group. So our registrars put everybody in one group. So we have kids that are ninth graders, we have kids that are seniors, we have kids that are playing sports, and some that have never even done anything athletic in their life, right? So we've set up a multi-stage system that we have novice, intermediate, and advanced training, and then we have a wellness aspect too. So we actually have, anywhere from 4 to 5 programs going on in one class at one time. And we're a very small school, so we're very fortunate that we're small, just because our class sizes are very, very personable, so we can manage those very easily. But it's something that I know some other schools are doing very similar things, but it's something where the direction we want this to go is pretty much in our hands. But right now, we're just seeing how this first semester plays out and what kids are. We're really trying to get the feedback from the students and going, hey, okay, I like training, but now I want my training to go this direction. Okay, well, now we have that niche because all our classes are elective. So the big thing is the more kids that we get involved or have those classes involved, then the more kids are going to take it from an elective standpoint. And our big thing now is I think we have, we only have 300 students in the whole high school, and we have 100, and I believe we're training 132. So we're almost at 50%. We're roughly at 40 some percent of our student body, which for our first semester is huge because it never had anybody like that. They never had anybody really train. It was usually like a sport coach that would come in and just train football, and then everybody else was kind of like left to the wayside, right? So, so this is something in a direction I think you're dead on as far as getting people prepared for the next level, and not necessarily the athletes at the next level, but even from the general wellness perspective, educating them how to train correctly or take care of themselves correctly, because that's something they can pass on. If they go to college and it's something that, there's a rec center there, we want them to be able to design their own program, understand how to, train. And we even have, we do have one of those applications, like we do use a team builder system So it's something we'll have those individuals that first year that you go to college. If you want, we stay in contact with those kids. So if it's something, if they want a workout sent to them, then we'll design workouts and still stay in touch with that alumni base, which is huge. I think a lot of people, once they leave, they think, well, those kids are done. We're not going to be in contact with them anymore, but we want to try to stay with them because that's a strong alumni base, and we're a very family oriented program. So since we are so small niche, so it's something we really want to, have an effect on those people later on in life too. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, and I think that's huge from a collegiate perspective is, once you're done, especially if a coach leaves and goes somewhere else, now all of a sudden there's kids there you recruited that their families trusted you with, and all of a sudden you've gone somewhere else and you kind of left those kids high and dry. Right. So, kids are transferring, kids can't find themselves as far as, where they want to play next, or, they're kind of, maybe they lost some love for the game, and then all of a sudden they're just, what's next for them? You know what I'm saying? So, but you hit a lot of good points, and I'm right there with you. I think it's huge trying to give back to that population as far as those high school population, and really trying to grow them and mature them, is because it's an important aspect, so.
I think it's a cool thing you're doing with the continued help. And that's something that I never played high school sports. I never even worked out in a gym until college. I had some weights that I did at home and pull up bar and things like that. But like, I went to college, and, I was actually signed up for athletic training, and didn't really know specifically what I wanted to do. And it turns out like athletic training probably isn't for me. So I switched to exercise science.
Right.
But like probably 2 months into my college experience, I really was kind of not really homesick, but I was just kind of like out of place, it felt like. And I didn't know anybody that went there. I didn't have any connections there. It was very much just like a weird experience for me.
Right.
And that's when I went into the gym for the first time, actually. And it would have been cool definitely to have that help from an outside source. Like, hey, this is how you do it from a more, programmed aspect of things. I definitely learned a lot, not having that as well. So, I think it turned out fine, but just from like kind of that continued community aspect, I think that's such a good idea, just to, because I think a lot of people are like me. They go off and they, maybe a few friends go, but like at a college, you might see them a couple times a week with different schedules and things. And I think that's just such a cool thing that I think more people
I think
could benefit from.
It really came about. It really came about because with so many online programs out there nowadays, I don't think it's, you can really spend a lot of money on different training programs, right? And people just don't know what the right training program is for them. So if it's something that we have an individual for 4 years through high school, and we develop them from a novice up to more advanced level, and then to more advanced, we already know what their assessment is. We already know what is going on with their bodies. It's not something they just, pay somebody for a cookie cutter program and follow it for 8 weeks and then go to somebody else for another cookie cutter program. You know what I'm saying? Because that happens. People don't see the results, and then all of a sudden they go somewhere else, right? I mean, it's American. It's the American way, right? If they don't see results right away. So that's something that we really want to implement. And we've even done it with we came in during the summer. We have a staff. There's 3 of us, and we kind of came in during the summer, and even those kids that were training at the school, and then all of a sudden they went on to college. We tried to get with them as soon as possible, and we're like, hey, like if you want this as an option, we're here for you. If not, that's fine too. But it's something from here on out. These kids that we deal with every time they graduate, we want if they want us as a resource, and if they like the training that we're doing, and obviously when they get to college, they may have more goals or more equipment or something like that, and that's something that we can sit down and devise something more obtainable for them, right? Like everybody has certain goals that they want to do. So, and that's something even with my former collegiate athletes, it's still guys that reach out to me and they're like, hey, coach, can you send me a program? Can you do this? Yeah, I have no problem doing that, but what are your goals? Are you going to stick with it? I don't want to give you a program and then, you quit after, a couple weeks, you know what I'm saying? Like, but most of the people that, I do, they're pretty consistent with things, and they, they're all about it, so, but that's something it kind of gave us, I came up with that idea a little bit, and it kind of helped out quite a bit because now we're there for those kids. And like you said, I mean, we're just extending and keeping that alumni process alive. Right. So That way, if they do come home for, home for Christmas break or home for the summer, they still have a place to train. They can stop by and still work out, just because, I mean, it's not like we're a large institution or anything, right? Like, we're pretty much, they can come by in a small town feel and they can come and use the facility. So I think that's a huge aspect. It's kind of lost, once you get to certain schools or certain levels, you kind of lose that feel a little bit. And then all of a sudden that's where people they say they lose interest in the sport or lose interest in doing it, but that's really not the case. It's just that they're just in an uncomfortable position. They just don't know how to, something's changed. Right. So, the more that we keep people comfortable and the more that we can keep things the same, I think the more consistent people can be, and the less likelihood that they actually, stop training or stop doing stuff. And, during, I hate bringing it up, quarantine and stuff like that, but now, like we talked about earlier, mental health and physical health is at an all-time high. And I mean, it's vitally important that we keep these individuals, training all the time, and we keep training ourselves. I think I don't think this problem is ever going to go away, even though we have, certain vaccinations or whatnot. It's always going to be around, but, you can easily walk into Walmart and you can see plenty of people that are obese, or not picking on Walmart or anything, but that's, it is what it is. I mean, you can walk down the road and you'll definitely see people that, are at fast food lines and they're not working out at all. So it's something that we just have to change as a culture and as a society. So
I think a bigger issue of the short term fix instead of that long term, that consistency.
Oh yeah.
And it's obviously, I don't know when it really started, but maybe sometime after World War II, the last 50, 60, 70 years, just building on, and now we're where we are, and this kind of crazy situation hits us, but it hits us harder than maybe it should if we were, if we were all taking care of ourselves. And
100%.
And I think that's one aspect that I really do like about sports, is that you can see not necessarily the full potential of someone, but you get to see kind of that glimmer of what a human is capable of. And it's kind of so rare within our society to see that from a physical perspective, but in sports, you really get to kind of see that, that physical potential come out. And I think it's just, it's really interesting if you kind of convert that into, how can we put that into the rest of society, like you're saying?
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Dealing with athletics, you see, at high school athletics, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but maybe you see the top 50% are athletes, right? And then you get to college, it's such a smaller number. Maybe it's like 20%. And then you get to pro, and it's like the top 4%. You know what I'm saying? But at each level, you see these, just like you said, these amazing capabilities of these individuals. And sometimes at college, you'll see individuals right away that could be pros right away, right? Like when I was working at UNC Charlotte with baseball there, we got a kid who was a freshman that, I mean, he was undersized, he was about 165 pounds, but, he jumped on we had a just jump mat to test vertical jump, and he jumped like a 37.5-inch vert. We're like, okay, this guy he's fast twitch. Like he's got some little bit of spark, you know what I'm saying? So I told him, I said, hey, as long as you keep that and we can add some size on you, like you're going to be a big time player, and he went through our off-season program, got up to, I think he put about 25 pounds on. And, when testing day came again, and I'm like, if this guy doesn't jump a 37, like I'm pretty much done, but I wasn't, but he jumped, he gained 25 pounds, still jumped a 37-inch vert, became a freshman All-American, moved, now he transferred to NC State, but, you have these freaks that he's going to be a pro player. There's no guarantee in my mind that he's going to be a pro player. They have you, because you've been around enough, you can see those tangibles, you know what I'm saying? And they take everything serious and they do the right thing, that's a kid as a freshman, even at the high school I'm at now, like, even though it's a smaller school, you have kids that, are going to be good college athletes, right? Like, they're asking questions, their nutrition's down, they have everything down pat, hey coach, I got 8 hours of sleep last night. I should have got 8.5, but I stayed up watching Netflix or something, like they're truthful, right? Like they understand what's going on. And then it's in the same sentence, you got a kid over, another kid right next to him that, I was on social media all night. I can be okay on 4 hours sleep, and you're like, dude, it's going to catch up to you, like you can only give so much tangibles. And that comes from, at the high school level, even the collegiate level, Well, I think more at the high school level, right? Like that comes from parenting. That comes from good parenting. That comes from kids, understanding what's going on at the college level. The first year comes from parenting, and then, years, 2 through 5 come from who you're hanging around, right? Just like you said, those people that you hang around the most are who you emulate the most. So, that first year when you get there, that's going to be your experimental time, right? Like, oh, hey, let's stay up and party. I don't have a curfew now, but then all of a sudden you get your little clique, and if you get in the wrong clique, your athletic career can go down really, really fast, right? So, those are kind of things you see, those top percentage of those kids, and even at the pro level, like I have some guys that played pro baseball and pro football, and those dudes they're just special dudes. You know what I'm saying? Like they handle themselves well. They do everything right, and it just falls into place for them, and you're like, it's crazy. So, but you get it's pretty awesome because you see them develop year after year. Like when I was at Charlotte, working with football, we had a walk-on football player. When he came in, he might have been 215 pounds, might have been even less than that. But then he's grown up, he's built himself up, a self-made man, and he's done everything right. And now, this is his second year with the, Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's, in the starting rotation. So you're like, this guy has done everything right, and everything's fallen in place for him. And that just makes, that's awesome. So, and then you always have some kids that, are just one step away, right? Like if they would have just done this, or they would have just done that, if they hung out with different kids, and you try to connect with all of them, but some kids you're just not going to connect with. Right. And it's unfortunate. That's why you hopefully have other coaches that are on your staff that connect with those kids, that have different personalities with you, to try to connect and a little bit different coaching. But that's the best feeling in the world, is try to, see those kids and see them move on, not only athletically, but also, see them move on to get married, have kids, have families, be successful. I mean, the sky's the limit, right? And just knowing that you had an opportunity to touch that person and stay, have some meaningful conversations with that person is a huge thing. So it's pretty rewarding for sure.
Yeah, and it's cool to have kind of the career to where you get to see different generations of people, and how do you think that from the beginning of your career to now, how has the quote unquote average athlete, the average person, really, how have they changed? Is it I mean, I'm sure there's pros and cons to it for sure.
No, 100%. I think it really deals with society's change too, right? Like, I mean, there's so many things going, especially the last 2 years, that have changed in society. But this is an ongoing situation. When I got into coaching in 1999, when I finished my degree, I mean, I went right into coaching, and you could, depending on what area you're in, right? Like I originally grew up in Northeast Ohio, industrial, blue collar type of kids. You're going to run through a wall. You're going to, do whatever you need to do to, be successful, even though athletically you may not be very athletic, right? The mentality kind of, took over. And then if you move to different, areas, dealing with different demographics and different kids, I mean, you kind of have to be a chameleon, and you kind of have to feel it out at first, because that blue collar, nose of the grindstone kind of mentality may just not work. It may be just not a good fit, So you really have to feel things out, and you really have to understand things. And I think over the last, maybe the last 10 years, things have really made a shift, even a little bit longer, maybe 10 or 12 years, to being more personable, getting to know individuals, getting them to buy in. I think, and that really goes, especially working with football, right? Like, or basketball, or different areas that have different demographics of athletes. And you talked about, how things were back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I think the big thing that's really changed is individuals, as far as a lot of individuals coming from single family homes, having single family parents, maybe just having a mom. So now all of a sudden, just feeling that out and understanding that, where those people come from, how to talk to them a little bit differently, because they may not be receptive to a father figure. Those are things that you have to kind of come in contact with and know those athletes. And the thing is, divorce rates are up year after year. Even after, quarantine, divorce rates are up, right? Like people have kind of, it's a trending thing, So it's something that, that's something that's just a really touchy subject. And you kind of have to feel that out with society and really understand how to talk to people in those kind of manners. Right. So even with social injustice and the rise of social injustice, I mean, to be truthful with you, when I worked at Charlotte with volleyball, we had a volleyball team of we had 6 African Americans on the team, and I felt, after the whole thing with the social injustice, I pulled them aside and said, hey, I'm here to listen if you ever want to talk, and if there's anything I could ever do for you, let me know. And they came back and said that was the most receptive thing they've had any coach say to them. So people kind of, when you're in a collegiate setting, people kind of just turn their head and go, well, they're here, like, they're going to do what I tell them to do. And that's not the case. I mean, you really have to be there for them, and you really have to understand their needs. And that's just not, those athletes, it's every athlete you deal with. But you really have to mold yourself with the times. And sometimes, you have to grow as a person because, 20 years ago, I would have never thought that quarantine would have happened with the whole COVID aspect. I would have thought that everything that happened with the social injustice, those things you just don't think those things would happen. Right. So you have to prepare and grow yourself as an individual and keep growing as time. You can never say, hey, I'm the perfect person, right? Like, you're always trying to change with times and trying to grow and just listening. And I think that's a huge perspective, is just trying to grow. And this is even about X's O's of training. Like, training's evolving all the time also with different equipment and stuff like that. But this is just how to deal with people. And I think if you know how to deal with people, I think that's going to make you a better person overall in the long run. So I think that's what life is really all about. It really doesn't matter what the X's and O's are. As far as being a coach, it's really knowing that person and really understanding what their needs are and listening to them. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. You have to continue growing and evolving, and now there's so many resources and so many great people out there doing that. And I think that's a really good place actually to end this podcast right there, is on that point, because it rings true for no matter, if it's a personal thing, if it's a business thing, if it's sports, whatever it is, when you stop, putting in the effort to become better, A, I think you're going to get passed up, and B, there's really no such thing, I don't think, as stagnation. I think you really are either getting better or you're getting worse. So yeah, that's a really strong point, I think.
No, that's huge. No, I appreciate it.
But yeah, thank you for sharing your time tonight and coming on the podcast and talking about your experience in this field. I think it's really cool to talk to somebody like you who has some good experience and some good time into it, and with different, different places, different environments, different people. It's really cool to have all that kind of perspective and share it, and really learn it, and taking those lessons and applying them kind of across whatever it is. Your regular 9 to 5 person does nothing with strength conditioning. It's important to learn how to talk to people, learn how to, to build a culture. It's important to do all these things that we talked about. So, I think it's so cool to see how those things can transfer over to anything.
No, you're 100% correct. Don't be a person that's their faces in the phone all the time. I think that's one thing I try to teach the kids I come in contact with daily is, if you're going to speak to somebody, look at them in the eye, shake their hand. The same things that, your mom and dad might have taught you when you were younger. I think those are the same things that we need to try to instill today, holding the door open for people, saying thank you, yes, sir, no, sir. I mean, those are lost arts. And I think everybody could prosper from being better at those, and, make the place that you're at the best place possible, and try to affect as many people as possible that you can. So I think that's huge.
Definitely. And that's what this podcast is all about, just maybe inspire one person who inspires one person who inspires one person. And that's, I think, how you make a change. And if all the podcasts out there, and certainly there's the bigger ones that are doing it on a huge, massive scale, but if all the little podcasts out there can do that, then I think this world's going to just really benefit from that kind of thing. And it's cool to be a part of it. And I know it's quote unquote my podcast, but it really feels like it's just me sharing my experience, and it's everybody's experience to kind of learn from. It's really cool.
No, it's 100%. It's awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to be on there, and appreciate meeting you in person finally, or I guess through Zoom, not really in person, but no, I love what you're doing. Like I told you earlier, and I think you have some great episodes, and I'm a big fan. So just keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. And if before we head out, if you want to share where people can get a hold of you or find you on social media, that'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Social media, Instagram. I think it's Coach JG Patrick. That's the easiest thing. Also on Twitter, you can check at the same exact handle. Those are the two main, I guess, social media that I use. But definitely reach out there. Can definitely, if you need to make a phone call or text message based off that, or email, very personable and very easy to get a hold of, and we can connect. So not an issue, and can talk about any subject you possibly want to talk about. So I'm pretty much an open book. So I'd love to help people out.